Welcome, everyone. My name is Matt Cotton. I am with the Office of Public Affairs for the Baha'i community of the United States. It's my great honor to welcome you to this conversation with this wonderful panel, whom I will introduce in just a minute. I hope most of you were able to enjoy the uplifting songs and prayers upstairs for the Choral Festival. And sorry if you happen to have missed it, and I hope you'll enjoy it either on any other day that you come visit the House of Worship and the choir might be singing, or at the very least next year when they'll have this Choral Festival, hopefully again. But I think those prayers, those songs are such a perfect note to start this conversation off of. This conversation, of course, is one around spiritual renewal in the life of our country. And we'll ask our panelists, what they think about that, but we'll also have time to invite the members of the audience as well to share their thoughts and questions. We know these types of conversations are ones that people are having from the very grassroots in homes and community centers to the national and international level between governments, among individuals, civil society, and so on. And so we hope this is just another one of those conversations, an example of the importance of this topic in the life of our nation at this moment. So I thought I'll share just a few more thoughts and ideas that has prompted the gathering of this particular panel and why we're having this conversation at this moment. So this conversation is taking place at a significant moment in the life of our country. Our country, the United States, is approaching the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. And right around now, many are reflecting on the founding ideals of this nation. And at the same time, we are conscious of the turbulence of the present moment. The polarization, the prejudice, the disunity, the disillusionment, the distrust, the weariness that so many people feel in public and in communal life. This message that prompted this gathering, I wanted to introduce, I hope all of you who registered or came through past the registration table were able to grab a copy of this message. This is a message called A Common Endeavor, and it was written by the Baha'is of the United States as a contribution to the conversations at this moment. A conversation around how can we see one another as embarking on a common endeavor, renewing the spiritual principles and spiritual capacities that are inherent to all of us as human beings, but we're also a part of the founding of this nation. So this is part of the reason why we were inspired to have this conversation in particular. So I hope all of you are able to pick up a copy and to extend this conversation in your own homes, in your own communities, among your friends, colleagues at work, and so on. So this message in particular frames this moment, this 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, as a moment to invite all to thoughtful conversation, a call to create spaces where we can pause, reflect, and listen to others with openness and goodwill. It suggests that beneath the anxiety of our time, there is also a widespread longing to transcend division and to contribute to common aims. This message states that our ancestors have long labored for the realization of the ideals of freedom, equality, and justice, and to build a more perfect union where all can flourish. And it is in a spirit of common endeavor with them, as much as with each other today, that we gather. Our purpose is not to contribute to any kind of partisan debate or to focus on particular political policies or personalities. We hope to ask deeper questions. What are the moral and spiritual dimensions of the challenges before us? What resources do religious and spiritual traditions offer for the renewal of the human spirit in society? How can we cultivate the qualities such as trustworthiness, generosity, moral courage, integrity, humility, and love that allow people to live and work together across difference? The A Common Endeavor letter observes that freedom, equality, and justice are not only political ideals, they are in essence moral and spiritual principles. It also names love, trustworthiness, generosity, integrity, and moral courage as qualities that must find expression in today's lives. So today we'll be exploring, what does spiritual renewal in the life of the nation mean? What ideals are in most need of fresh expression today? What language helps us speak about moral and spiritual renewal in ways that are broadly accessible? And what are religious communities especially capable of cultivating in people and communities? And what kinds of spiritual innovations are needed now? So with that, I'll introduce our wonderful panel for today, starting with Dr. Naina Shah. Dr. Naina Shah is an international scientist, a theoretical physicist, dedicated to living a conscious, compassionate, and creative life, illuminated by the constant inquiry of truth. Using the quantum laws of physics, her research seeks to understand how different phases and properties of matter emerge in a collection of particles interacting with each other under different conditions. That quest is also to identify the universalities within the diversity. She has a holistic, plant-based, and ahismic lifestyle rooted in her Jain upbringing, and is a long-term Vipassana mediator, as well as yoga and nonviolent communication practitioner. She has founded and led several initiatives in diverse spheres and settings, is involved in grassroots activism and regenerative movement, and her work spans from the local to the global level. She serves on the Environmental Advisory Board of the City of Cincinnati, the Agricultural Education Advisory Board for the Cincinnati Public Schools, as the director on the board of Cincinnati Permaculture Institute, and as a trustee on the board of the Parliament of the World's Religions, and as a patron of Animal Interfaith Alliance. She also serves on the Cincinnati Public Schools District Wellness Committee and the Policy, Education, and Advocacy Committee of the Greater Cincinnati Regional Food Policy Council, hosted by Green Umbrella Regional Climate Collaborative. So please give a warm welcome to Dr. Next, I'll introduce Katie Brinkman Baxter, the Chief Impact Officer and COO for Interfaith America. Katie oversees Interfaith America's long-standing program areas, ensuring alignment and strategic prioritization across projects. Across more than a decade with the organization, she has built relationships with key partners and associations in service of advancing a vision of an interfaith America. Katie has been published in the Journal of College and Character, Liberal Education, and helped develop the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America's policy statement on interreligious commitment. Her interests in religion and higher education are rooted in an MA in college student personnel from BGSU, a BA in religion from Wittenberg University, and professional experience in university settings. Beyond Interfaith America, Katie enjoys visiting local parks with her family and serving in leadership roles at her Lutheran church. Please welcome Katie Brinkman Baxter. Next, I'll introduce Kenneth E. Bowers, Secretary General of the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of the United States. Kenneth E. Bowers serves as the Secretary of the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is, and prior to being elected on the National Assembly, he served as an appointed member of the National Teaching Committee, the principal arm of the National Assembly, acting as its secretary for nearly 10 years. Until 1991, Mr. Bowers owned and operated a business in Atlanta, and he is the author of God Speaks Again, an introductory book about the Baha'i faith. Ken and his wife Mojgan make their home in Wilmette, Illinois, in the northern suburbs of Chicago, right across the street. And last but not least, of course, let me welcome Reverend Alvin C. Bibbs from the One America movement, as well as the Justice Journey Alliance. Reverend Alvin C. Bibbs specializes in justice, diversity, equity, and inclusion, dedicated to empowering communities, cultivating diverse leadership, and driving systemic change. Whether through coaching, speaking engagements, or strategic partnerships, his work continues to transform lives. As president and CEO of the Justice Journey Alliance, Leadership Foundation of Chicago, he is committed to fostering racial reconciliation and social justice, uniting people of all backgrounds to address structural inequalities.
Reverend Bibbs also serves as the Chicago Regional Manager for the One America Movement and the Community and Faith Engagement Officer for Together Chicago. Reverend Bibbs holds a Master's of Arts in Christian Leadership Development and Organizational Management from Fuller Theological Seminary in Pasadena, California. And Reverend Bibbs has three amazing, gifted, and spiritually surrendered sons, Alvin C. Bibbs Jr., Brandon Q. Bibbs, and Devin L. Bibbs. Please welcome Reverend Alvin Bibbs. Thank you so much. All right, so to get our panelists started, one of the foundational questions we wanted to invite all of them to share their reflections on is, what does the phrase spiritual renewal in the life of the nation mean to you? And why do you think a conversation about it is especially timely? So if it's okay, I'll start with you, Naina.
Sure. So for me, as you know, my background is in science and spirituality, and I practice Vipassana meditation, not mediation.
Oh,
so I don't know. For a question like this, instead of starting from some abstract, imaginary situation, I often.
Oh, can you come closer to the microphone?
I'll let Matt do it. Can you hear me now? Yeah.
Thank you.
So I feel like it's much easier to understand things when you start from your own experience and not make general statements that are just coming from intellectual, evaluations or what you've read or what you've heard, but something that rings true to you from your own experience. And so when I think about spiritual renewal, the question I ask myself is, what does it mean to me, first of all? And so then I can make some authentic statement about for spiritual renewal for the nation. So for me personally, when I had my daughter, who's now 13, the whole experience with pregnancy and giving birth and nursing her, and that whole experience for me was a real spiritual renewal. It was it was a big transformation in my life. And I just became very much aware of the connection. I was always kind of knew it at the intellectual level, but I really kind of felt it in my own practice and how I make choices in my day-to-day life about my connection to all the animals, all beings, and the earth. And so for me, when I think about spiritual renewal of a nation, it's really a question of not like what everyone is going to suddenly start speaking differently. How is it that their day-to-day life is going to be different for individual, how it is going to be different as a family, how is it going to be different as a community, a city, and the whole country, and how do they feel, what is their part in the whole world and whole universe, how do they see themselves as part of the whole. So the renewal has to kind of address these questions. How is this going to change? And I feel like just the realization of connections, that is kind of, I feel like, really important. And all the spiritual movements that have happened in the past, they have all not come out of vacuum. There was something happening, some situation, and there were things that were seeming are not serving their purpose. Some new change is needed, and that's where renewal comes from, the word, right? So something was not working, and then there have been all the different movements, all the religious teachings have come kind of on that background. And I'm, of course, most familiar with the one in India where Mahavir and for the Jain religion and for Buddha, for Buddhism, they were seeing that there were practices that were there that was currently practiced in the Hindu religion, where there was caste system and animals were sacrificed for rituals, and they were the Brahmins were the only ones who could take part in the religious things, and this was meant for everyone, this experience, because the idea was the suffering is universal, and so should be the path out of it, and that everyone should have the opportunity to do that. And there have been many such renewals that happened for example, in India, and women, I feel, is a very good reference point to see all over how did women what was their role? And I feel in some sense a woman is mother of spirituality, because not only like whatever religious teacher came from her womb, and also like just the feminine principle. And so I think like always women were finding ways to kind of address whatever issues were going on through their spiritual, in some sense, resistance, or like kind of challenging what was going on around them. So if we kind of look at all that, we can find lots of answers there. And currently also, it's like we are asking this question, as you said, like everything is not well. And like it's not just like not well in the nation, everywhere in the globe. And it reflects each and every life, right? We all feel it. And so I think like because of the interconnection, I think for me the spiritual renewal would be kind of very important to realize the connection also with the earth, that we are part of, like, you know, Mother Earth is not just for word's sake, but it's really we are kind of, we are not there without the mother and everyone, all the beings and the ecosystems. So realizing that connection, and also realizing at the same time, it's 250 years of this nation, but there has been earth here, there have been all the trees, all the animals, and like, you know, many cultures before that, indigenous cultures. So integrating all that and coming to full realization of that connection, I think, and with what happened here on this land and with everywhere else, is how, for me, like spiritual renewal will look like, and it has to come from practice. How does my day look different? Not just intellectualization of like how I'm going to think differently. It has to not stay in the head. So for a renewal, it has to be, heart has to be very much at the center.
Thanks so much for having us here. Thanks for kicking us off. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Katie again, and I come at this work personally out of my own mainline Protestant tradition. I'm renewed each week through my own faith commitments. Folks come at this differently. Interfaith America's work is inclusive of folks who have traditional religious belonging and people who consider themselves not religious in any definition of that word. I happen to be traditionally religious and find that I need that in order to make my way through the world these days, as you said, and for all the reasons that you mentioned, Matt. I also come from an extended interfaith family, and that's what brings me to the work that I do at Interfaith America. And at Interfaith America, we try to renew the world in our little way through our vision and our mission. And our vision is an America where Americans embrace the power of pluralism by bridging across deep difference and working towards the common good. And that's an aspiration, it's an idea, it's not something that any of us will get to on our own, but it's what we hold ourselves to. Interfaith America has been around for about 30 years, and I met someone just before this who knew our founder and president, Ibu, before 30 years ago when he was pre-IFYC, pre-Interfaith Youth Corps and Interfaith America, so the vision existed even beyond that. We have had a variety of mission statements, but the same North Star of bringing people together across deep difference and across deep religious difference to have an impact on the common good. And the way we do that right now at a mission level is by activating leaders to build an Interfaith America. And we do think that this is spiritual transformation. For, again, people come at this from their own beliefs and belonging and traditions, but they're usually coming from their own value systems, and they find shared meaning in this work. And I think one of the big challenges is that all pieces of that are under threat right now. Do people feel that they have the agency to build? Do people feel like, especially, we work with a lot of young people, and we also work with very senior leaders? Do they feel like they have the agency to develop as leaders right now? Do people feel like we can align on what the common good looks like in our local communities or at a national level? It feels really hard to come together across difference. That feels really scary. And so all of these pieces that for us is a vision, is missional for what we do at Interfaith America, can feel really challenging. We believe that it is possible. So we believe that this is the work in front of us. We believe that it is spiritually grounded work. For me, in my own language, it's work that I believe that we are called to. And we believe that it's work that as Americans, it's part of what we are here to build. So I'm excited to continue to this conversation, but just to give you a little bit of a sense. I guess it may be helpful to say, so that's who we are visionally. We're a national civic not-for-profit organization. So we're based here in Chicago. We work across the country in higher education, with workplaces, to coach people on how to bridge deep difference in the places that they work. And we have partnerships with civic nonprofits such as the Habitat for Humanity and YMCA. So that's what our work looks like across the nation. And as I mentioned, we've been around for 25 or 30 years.
So once again, my name is Ken, and I feel so honored to be on such a distinguished panel, so thank you, Nina and Katie, for your comments. When we think of spiritual renewal, I sort of think of it in two ways. One, I'm a little bit of a history nerd. I like to read history quite a bit. And if you read American history, one of the things that you see is that, in a sense, there always has been this question of renewal from generation to generation. Every generation in our society, and indeed in any progressive society, any society that has such ideals, has found the same challenge. And one cannot absolve oneself in your generation of that struggle because you can't rest on the laurels that have been achieved in the past. And if you look at the sweep of history for the last 2.5 centuries, it becomes very clear also that the project continues. We haven't actually yet truly fulfilled the ideals that are enshrined in our founding document, the Declaration of Independence, far short of that, as a matter of fact, notwithstanding that countless individuals of all kinds have struggled and have sacrificed and have tried their best to meet the needs and the challenges of the times in which they live. So there's almost that eternal or ongoing aspect of the challenge that we face. But the other part of it is that each generation also has its own particular set of circumstances that it has to think about. We have to ask ourselves questions like, well, what is the road that we have come to get us where we are? What have our forebears built for us? Where have they brought us? What are the current conditions that we're facing? What is the reality we now have? And then what does experience and what do these principles suggest that we're talking about today in terms of things we can actually do to take ourselves further down, that road towards unity, towards justice, towards prosperity and peace for all of the citizens of this country. And if I may say by extension, anything we achieve here will impact the entire globe just by virtue of it's the United States. And it has that sort of an impact. So those questions really are there. And in our own times, I think Katie got us really well started on that. We do face particular challenges. There are challenges of polarization also that Matt talked about. And if we think of the young people in particular facing these challenges of polarization, they have access to information such as we've never seen before. But is it bringing people together or is it causing fragmentation? Are the communities that we are creating through these new tools, communities where people are coming together in a broad sense, such as Katie has suggested we need to do, or are they communities where people who are like-minded kind of are able to then retreat into their own insular bubbles and everyone else? So these are very real and immediate questions that we're facing now in this society. So how will young people be provided with a framework of thinking, a moral framework, if you will, that allows them to understand these forces that are in operation around them, and then to take constructive and practical measures to work against those forces and even to create systems of justice that get us to that new level. And so really, for me, this is what Renewal is. It's sort of an ongoing project, but it's also a very particular set of challenges for our own generation. And I hope that during the course of the afternoon, we'll learn more about, well, what are the insights from religion that we could identify that will help us move forward.
Well, good afternoon again, everybody. Reverend Alvin C. Bibb Sr. I want to thank my colleagues again here as well for being a part of this amazing conversation on the spiritual renewal of our nation. I represent an organization, the One America Movement, which is a national not-for-profit organization, interfaith movement across the country. And as we look at this particular subject matter, we believe as a movement across this nation that there's a spiritual crisis within our country centered on polarization in the area of race, politics, and religion. But as I was listening to my colleagues and even preparing for our time here today, a question really centered in my spirit. And as I was listening to each of them share, I wanted to share this statement with each and every one of you because I believe there's a missing link to this statement of a spiritual renewal in our nation. And what I believe is the missing link is that there is a spiritual awakening that needs to happen before the renewal can be operationalized. Did you hear what I just said? There needs to be a spiritual awakening because today within our society, across the board, there is this spiritual numbness that is extremely prevalent within our society. And so the average soul, the average individual, is really not clear on what renewal can look like until the awakening can happen. We got to wake some people up. Yeah. There are some people that are sleeping right now as we move into this 250 year of commemorative of a nation. There are folks that are still numb trying to figure out how far have we truly have advanced. What are the missing links? What are the missing pieces to this nation that we all are a part of? If we are truly trying to build this beloved community within our society and lift up the appropriate norms and values within this world, we got to wake up. Yep. So the key question is that I have for all of us here today as we center in on this spiritual renewal conversation, where are you in that conversation? Are you awake or are you still sleeping? And that's an internal question, introspective process that we all have to examine and ask ourselves that question. Because if we're true to our common lives and our common good together and its interconnectedness through the faith communities that are represented, are we truly awake around the issues and the struggle, or are we just falling in line with the misnomers and the bamboozleness that's happening within our society? We got to wake up, friends. Give yourselves a nice round of applause if you're awake here today.
Well, I hope this conversation for my panelists feels free for you to engage with one another and to, feel free to, jump in. I don't have to ask the question naturally. A lot is coming to mind just from your comments alone, but actually, Naina, please jump in.
Yeah. So, the youth that you referred to is so important, and I think the main thing is they are feeling really discouraged because no one listens to them. I think we need to begin by listening. For any renewal, we have to learn the art of listening and receiving. because I think there's a lot of talk about giving, but when giving comes from a place of ego, it's not true giving. And so unless we learn the art of receiving, where everything that you're giving is just, oh, sorry. So I'm just saying, is it okay, better? Maybe there's a directionality, so I'll try to maybe stay a little away.
Lean into the mic.
Okay. Hello. Now I feel like I'm going to sing, actually. So I was just saying that the children that are there, we are not really listening to them, and we are always talking about giving, but giving, if you just say, be kind, give, say thank you, this is not what our children want to hear at all, because I think it has to be something that comes naturally to them. These kinds of acts, we think we are doing good service by teaching our kids good, oh, do this, do that. But I don't think it's almost like they are going to feel like that's something that is a burden, that they have to do this. It has to come from their hearts, and not just for children, for everyone. If we go around telling people, do this, do that, and judging them all the time for what they do, it's not going to work. So first of all, I feel like we have to all learn the art of receiving and listening. So kind of both go together, receiving, not just when someone is speaking, but there's just so much abundance everywhere, in nature. And nature, first of all, we have to realize is not something outside, it's inside of us. We are part of nature. And we cannot even survive without the oxygen that comes from the trees that everyone knows, but it's a really good reminder that we are not really, this body is not our real body, we're really connected. And so I think the art of receiving, for that, what we need is time. We have to create space and time. Right now, everything is too rushed. So what I was saying about awakening, how can you even have a moment to rest and to connect to your inside if you're just somehow meeting your needs? And there's so much. There are a lot of people here who have to really work hard right now, and they don't even have the luxury of sitting and resting under a tree even. So I think what really has to happen for us to learn how to receive and listen is to create those conditions, and then we will naturally start receiving, because that's our natural state. So in some sense, renewal is more like remembering. And for us to create conditions, no one has to teach. It's there in us. We just need space and time. And how can we do things such that that is created? And then we can start receiving. And for receiving, you need to have that openness inside, the spaciousness inside of you. And for that, the way everything is organized, our schedules, the way all the institutions work, all the offices, corporate offices, everywhere, schools are a really important place. Everywhere there has to be space for this receiving to happen. Once we start receiving, giving is a natural thing. No one has to teach anyone to give. It's like an overflow that happens. You're receiving so much that it's that's the only thing you know is to give, because you've received so much. So it just comes naturally. And so I feel like schools right now is all the focus currently is on instructions and how to follow instructions. We don't want children to follow. I hope that none of the children will follow instructions, because if they keep doing what we have been doing, nothing is going to change. So I really want children to not follow instructions. So renewal, I think, has to start in classrooms where children are getting to speak, getting to express themselves, and there are people are mainly listening. So it has to be an inverted thing, where schools are a place for us to listen and renew ourselves by listening to children. And so I feel like listening is very important, and I agree that younger people are really feeling frustrated because no one really listens to them.
Did you want to jump in? Or you want me? So I'm loving where this conversation is taking us. So in our reflections about spiritual renewal, I heard comments that were having us reflect on how spiritual renewal in part is remembering what is innate to us, our human spirit, what's innate to our souls, and how do we create the conditions to renew those qualities so that they can find fresh expression today to address the needs of today. So one of the questions I wanted to invite the panelists to maybe share additional thoughts and experiences on was, as our country, as the United States is approaching this 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, as we talked about the ideals that were, not originated in that declaration, but in that declaration was articulated ideals that were much deeper, that go back to the very essence of what it means to be a human being. But we recognize the need to be awake to them and to figure out how to operationalize them so that we can renew our society to reflect those ideals more closely. So I would love to hear your thoughts on what ideals in particular do you feel are in need of fresh expression today in the life of our country or the life of our communities? And what are examples that maybe you've seen of how those ideals can be expressed at the level of the community or at the level of the nation?
All right, we're not going to keep going down the row every time. I'll start this time, but I have a particular answer to this. You asked me to speak to this, so I'm going to speak to it here. This is not an ideal of 250 years ago, of the founding of our nation, but a concept from maybe 75 years ago or so. Somebody can correct me. And that is the concept of the melting pot. And we know the concept of the melting pot, and there was a period in our history where school children were taught that folks come here, you come to America, and you belong by assimilating your beliefs and your traditions and things that you are unique to your culture by putting them all into a melting pot. And at the time, this was a positive concept. It's that we all become Americans here, and this was the image of the moment. And now, of course, it has become not a helpful metaphor because it means sort of throwing away the things that make us unique and distinct and melting them down into a goo that must taste terrible, right? The idea of a melting pot, just sort of, when you really think about it, you're like, that's sort of. So I don't propose, Interfaith America proposes, replacing the idea of a melting pot with a potluck. And a potluck, so an actual metaphor. So an idea, a metaphor, and actual real potlucks. And so thinking of the United States as a potluck, where people bring their distinct contributions, their highest and best, the thing that they want to offer to others and share and say, this is who I am, this is something that I want to contribute that tells you something about me, and I'm going to place it next to your highest and best and across the table from something that someone else who I don't know at all but would like to get to know brought. And together, we're going to get to know each other, and we're going to build relationships, and we're going to form community. And so if you think about the best potluck you've ever attended, you know that the beautiful bread that your grandmother taught you how to make complements the salad that your neighbor brings every time without fail. And together on that plate with something else and the surprise dessert that so-and-so brought makes up the most beautiful meal. And so, thank you. You don't always get applause for that. And so so we propose to you the idea, the concept, the ideal of a potluck to replace the idea of the melting pot. And depending on how this conversation goes, I might have more to say about potlucks later.
I just want to say one sentence. So I would like to see, like, the choral festival that we just experienced upstairs. I was sitting there and I was thinking, like, no one needs to really speak. This panel discussion doesn't have to happen. As long as we create a condition where the whole nation can be a choral festival like that, where it's possible to have that. Like, how can we create conditions for that to happen across the nation, where there are people who are performing, they're contributing their own voice, but they're singing in harmony, and there are people who are there listening, and everyone gets to be part of this experience, which everyone found it transformative. So I think just creating those spaces, right, like what you were saying, I really love the idea of the potluck. And so this is kind of like, creating a choral festival for the nation is kind of, I feel, a good metaphor for spiritual renewal. How can we do that?
Great. So I'm just kind of following this entire thread from Alvin's comments right on through, and I'm putting it all together. And first of all, with respect, Nina, I mean, I know what you're saying about children not wanting to follow instructions, but I do hope mine will follow my instructions. So okay, with that exception, I agree with you 100%.
All parents like only that exception.
Exactly. So, Alvin challenged us to think about ourselves. Are we awakened? Are we ready for the questions that we're facing internally? And the way I interpreted it for myself, I mean, the way I was hearing that question was, is my heart open? Do I have an open heart? Am I going to be willing to think of others, to listen to others, to think about higher things than just my own personal, closed self-interest, right? And this was a very important call, I think, that Alvin issued to all of us to begin thinking about. And then in Nina's comments about young people, this too was a very, very profound point, because I think one of the consequences of such an openness of heart is exactly the point that she was making, which is it's a willingness to hear the aspirations of others rather than just tell others their aspirations or what they should do or what have you. But the element of faith that comes in there is that when they do that, they'll have good aspirations, that they really want good things and right things. And that is an instinct, I think, in young people that should be cultivated. So it's 100%. And then finally, Katie is talking about, it's not melting pot, but it's a potluck. Now, I've been to some pretty bad potlucks, but I'll still go with this. So, I think some of you are laughing, so you already know what I'm talking about. But it's a very profound concept, because it means everyone brings something to this equation. And I think since it is a panel of spirituality and faith, this is a very profound thing when we think about the Baha'i concept, which I think is essentially the same thing, of unity in diversity. So at one level, we all have the same aspirations. We all want justice. Who doesn't believe in love? Who doesn't believe in the happiness of our children and their security and welfare? These are things that unite us all, whatever our beliefs or traditions might be. Yet, the beauty of the differences is that this brings a richness of perspectives to these questions, rather than a monolithic idea. But when we appreciate all the flavors in the potluck and all the different dishes that people are bringing, we have a richness that's there that we all then have access to and can use for the benefit of everyone.
Yeah, I think that as we continue this conversation, the ideas of liberty and equality and human dignity is really important for our times. When we think of that Declaration of Independence, it talks about we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are what? Created equal. But something has triggered a different reality for us currently here today. We live in such an unwell society. And every generation is yearning and seeking answers. There's a deep level of weariness. There's a lot of weight that every human being is carrying right now. And therefore, there's a lot of wounded souls seeking answers, seeking guidance. I come from the spiritual tradition and the church background that believes that the local church is the hope of the world. And somewhere along the line, the local church and its leadership is extremely silent in these unwell and crisis moments that we live. And as we hear from my colleagues here as well, the next generation is saying they've lost confidence in these spiritual institutions because of what? The lack of moral direction, guidance, and leadership that is coming from the houses of worship from a variety of different traditions. I know that breaks my God heart. I know it aches his heart, and it should ache every person's heart. So if we're going to be true to this spiritual renewing and lifting up values and having a clear pathway of how we address the issues of justice and equality and righteousness for such a time as this, we have to stand up and be counted. Because I think what has happened generationally, friends, we've got really comfortable as faith people in leaning and waiting on that one prophetic voice. On that one prophetic voice. It doesn't matter what tradition you represent. There's been that prophetic voice that the flock rallies around and gets its marching orders. But friends, we've missed the point here. Every single person that walks this earth is that prophetic voice. We are the ones that can make the spiritual revolution happen, starting right here today. And here's the reality, friends. I get excited about this, as you can see. We have no excuses. We are advanced in technology, industries. We have more tools and resources at our disposal than any human race has ever existed. We have no excuses. We have no excuses to rest in the chaos of the climate that we live in today. And therefore, the next generation, the emerging leaders, are watching us. They're paying full attention to how we respond, how we act, how we resource, and what we say. My organization launched a movement several years ago in 2020 called Beyond Words. Friends, we got to move beyond the rhetoric. We got to move beyond the pushing the pads and the paper. We got to organize and mobilize and strategize to fight the forces that is all against the spiritual renewal of our nation. See? Because the reality, friends, we all are created equal. But we must continue to get up close to one another. Because you can't hate when you're up close to one another. You can love, you can worship, you can fellowship, you can dine, you can break bread together. We got to get up close together. And we got to stop creating these barriers and roadblocks that's hindering the advancement of this beautiful nation that we live in. Because right now, we're trying to roll back the clock. We're trying to roll back the clock. And we cannot stand for the censoring and all of the issues that is addressing the BIPOC community and those indigenous people that have voices and families and communities and neighborhoods that matter. And it's up to us to address these spiritual crises around the issue of race and politics, religion, all of those issues. The time is now. I'm going to issue you another challenge and charge. It's time. Be brave.
Well, I definitely want to build on this challenge, this conversation that Alvin is stimulating for us, and to take it back to the practical ideas that were coming out, especially about young people, about gatherings for potlucks. And one of the reasons why we wanted to convene this particular panel was because we know a lot in the discourse in our country is seeking answers and how to address all of these challenges. For a long time, our country probably tried to do the thing where it put religion in a box and thought religion only can be concerned with itself, but the rest of society's got to figure out the rest of society's problems. But I think we're finding more and more prevalent in the discourses across the board is answers are being sought even within religious communities to apply to groups and to apply to the reality of the nation that isn't normally considered faith-based or related to religion at all. And so we wanted to bring this panel together because we know that there are many insights into how do you connect spiritual ideals to practical action within religious communities. And so I would love to invite the members of the panel to think about the different communities you come from and to see what are examples of how religious communities or communities that are organized around spiritual principles, what insights are coming out from those experiences about how do you connect spiritual ideals to practical steps that you take as an individual, as a member of a family, or as a member of a community. So feel free to jump in.
So Alvin, before the presentation today, was sharing with me a little bit about his life. And one of the amazing things that I learned was that he met Dr. King when he was a kid. It turns out we were born in the same year. And he was about 6 years old and met Dr. King. And Dr. King, with his parents' permission, gave a blessing over him. This was the beginning of his path to where he is now. And in thinking about Dr. King, which I know you've done, but I've also done, I grew up in the Deep South, and this was Jim Crow, and this was a time when things were really, really bad. One of the things that you said was bravery. With bravery, there's got to be a faith that if you're brave, something's going to happen, something's going to change. And Dr. King, to your question about, like, what are the insights from religion, a thing that sometimes is forgotten is how deeply influenced the civil rights movement itself was by a sense of religious ethic. Now, it doesn't mean everybody was the same religion as King or any one religion. There were people who were not particularly of faith or anything like that, as well as any number of others who were involved in that. But part of the vision that Dr. King had was, first, there's a moral order in the universe. The arc of the universe bends towards justice, as he said. Now, of course, that didn't mean it naturally bent. We've got to do a little bending, to get that, to get that justice to come, right? But that's kind of a religious idea, and so that courage and that bravery that Alvin called us to is, if you will, kind of a spiritual resource that's born of a faith that if we act, something will happen. But there are other forms of bravery, I think, that can also be expressed. I mean, you can think of, like, the protests and the dangers that took place there. And there are public demonstrations that we can do. But sometimes we might think, and sometimes I think it myself, you're overwhelmed. I mean, it's a huge country. It's a very complex world. There's a lot of difficulty out there. How do I, just one person, make a difference in the world? What would be my act of bravery? I think there are insights there, too. He put his arm around me. And part of that is, well, you make a friend who's not like you. Make a friend who's from, another background than you. That's a step, and it can be a brave step, because as you begin to associate with others who don't have your background, and you learn from them with that open heart, with that willingness to hear their aspirations, their stories, even their struggles and their pains, and you share together, a new kind of a thing is born. There's an association born. When that starts, then there are things that people can do together, whether it's a couple of individuals or even a community in a neighborhood, together to serve those common aspirations that they have. And the next brave step is to feel as though we have agency and we can take agency to make that change collectively and move forward together. So I think those are the kinds of things that just in our own environments where we live. You talked about the local church, but the importance of that is change like this. If we're waiting for, some congressman, to change everything for us by legislation, no. Change of this kind is a matter of the heart, and there's no shortcut. It's how you connect hearts with each other and then take action on that connection that makes all the difference in the world. Well, there's a lot there to talk about, but for me, that is where real social transformation. So more than just legislation, more than just association, but transformation comes from those kinds of relationships.
Let me share. Give them, yeah. I want to piggyback on his comments because this is very important. When we think about spiritual renewal happens economically, educationally, socially, racially, all of the above. And I'm going to give you an example of how within my network, the spiritual condition and the awakening really is happening on a grassroots level that you need to know about. And this is under the idea of what is called justice deposits from an economic perspective. A dear friend of mine and a colleague who's the senior pastor of Community Christian Church right here in Naperville. When we launched this Beyond Words movement back in 2020, we realized that economically the scale is imbalanced. And one of the areas that has been a major stumbling block within the indigenous communities is lending institutions. When you think of our lending institutions today, the more traditional models has trillions and trillions of dollars that is being deposited on a regular basis. But those that are Black and minority owned has a very small percentage in comparison to the national, traditional institutions. Well, Dave Ferguson and our friends, we came up with this concept of justice deposits. Justice, number one. It's about justice. But we're going to redistribute capital into lending institutions where those that represent the underserved and under-resourced communities can receive those small business loans, those loans to purchase their first homes, to assist with educational opportunities for their offsprings. The list goes on and on and on. But it didn't stop there. Pastor Dave Ferguson said, look, we're going to lead by example. You're talking about being brave. We're going to lead by example. We're going to redistribute $250,000 into a Black and minority-owned institution to ensure that the next family, the next household, will have the capital and will not be turned down by the traditional institutions that continue to look at individuals that don't look like them and say, no, decline. Now they're getting documentation that says, yes, accept it. See, that's justice deposits. But that's part of the spiritual condition economically that we have to address as well within our society to balance the playing field, to experience when we come to the potluck table, we all got a full dish. We all can come in there with our meals prepared and ready to go. That's what we have to do when we talk about the spiritual renewal, educationally, economically, all right, within our healthcare industry, all of these systems that continue to hinder the American dream and building this beloved community within our society. So think about it. Every single person have a rainy day fund in your back pocket. Think about how you can leverage that rainy day, a portion of it, just think about a quarter of it, and redistribute it into a minority-owned institution. You're being brave, but you're also going to make a tremendous impact and difference that's going to raise the spiritual energy of households and communities within our society. This is the work of being brave. We just can't talk about this stuff. We got to get out here and do it. So are you awake with me today? Yeah. All right.
So this is slightly on a different track, but I think I just wanted to take us back to 1893 when the first parliament happened, where the first time the East and the West religions were meeting. And, at that point, from what I've read, it was this encounter, it's like when you meet people and you have an opportunity to interact and get to know each other, as what you were saying too, that's when transformation can happen. As long as you're staying away because you're suspicious and you're judging someone else, how can there be any connection that can happen? And so those kinds of convenings are really, really important. And that is what, so it was in 1893, from what I read, everyone thought, wow, it's so beautiful. All the religions are coming together. There's so much peace. No one anticipated that there were going to be 2 wars that are going to follow after that. And no one was really prepared for it. And so then, 1993, it was again revived. And that has kind of been always the idea, is to these convenings, you come, there are people from all over the globe that come together from different religious backgrounds. And when you get to meet each other and you see, the common thing that, we are all having very similar things, all our values, from whatever path we have come on. It's like the way we have different languages and the way we might have different kinds of music. We are not going to fight about languages. So it's the same thing. They might have come up with different religious traditions because of historic reasons in different regions. And but we cannot get stuck to that history. We need to be aware of history, acknowledge it, respect it, but we cannot stay in that old story. We have to move on, and that's where renewal comes from. What is our story of the current time? And can we adopt all the, the religions that are there? What is their role now? Because if we stay stuck in, this is what happened then, this is what happened, and we keep fighting about it because of whatever happened historically, we are stuck. So renewal also means letting go, right? To make space for something new, you have to let go of something, otherwise there's no space. So we come back to having spaciousness, and so I think we have to kind of move beyond the thing and realize that now the current time, these are all the issues right now, and what our religions tell us about current times, okay? And so I think, and that kind of thing, I really appreciate that in the parliament, different religions, different traditions, they all come together, thousands of people, and whoever comes there is will want to come back again because people love to connect across differences. Actually, there's a huge amount of joy one finds from that. And that's the thing, we have to create spaces. I come back to that. Things will happen if we create space and time. Our job is not to tell anyone what needs to be done, is to create the conditions. And so the parliament, there's this global ethic document which kind of emphasizes that across all the differences, all the religions, there are universal values and principles. And that doesn't mean that we forget about all these religions. Yes, they all are there, and they're amazing and beautiful in their own right. But then can we just focus on what is it that is universal in amongst all those differences? And then with that global ethic, if we all say, we agree on these things, we all care about truth, we all care about ahimsa, which is non-violence, we care about every life, we care about dignity of everyone, and the earth. So that was the really important addition. That is kind of, I feel Parliament is a good example of how you have to move on with the current times. And so climate action program is a new thing that is very active in the Parliament of the World's Religions, and that is so much of science is involved in that. So we have this climate action program, and then we have different task forces, which is women's leadership, and then we have next generation task force, indigenous task force, and peace and justice. And the idea is that all these there's a common thread through all these things and all the crises that we are facing today. As you were saying, it comes down, and the common thread is the spirituality. Everything connects to, when you look inside, every crisis is basically connected to your experience of values. And I think that is the thread that passes through all the crises. So if there is a spiritual renewal, all those crises will kind of get addressed. And without that, it's kind of like if you go around trying to say, oh, I'm going to try to address this health crisis, because this is a serious problem in the US. Like, health is like how much money is spent, like is one of the largest things. And this can be easily be eliminated. But then when you start thinking about it, what is it that's recommended? It starts coming down, again, even health comes down to spiritual health. It comes down to realizing our connection with the earth and all of the beings. So if we damage earth and all the beings, it's coming back to us. So all those connections, every crisis, at the bottom of it is the disconnect. We find everywhere is the same answer for every crisis is a representation of some disconnect. And that disconnect is basically because of the fact that spiritually, like the thing is not connected. And so I think what is really important when we talk about spiritual renewal is to not focus only on one area, because then we will be making the same mistake again, and we will be again going through the same problems. We have to realize that spirituality cannot have boundaries. It cannot be that I draw the line here. I care only about the humans. As soon as you draw any line anywhere, the renewal is incomplete, and we will keep having issues. So I think, like what you were saying, like every generation has that, and I feel we are at a very important, special point right now where we have to realize that we are here for a reason, all of us right now, at this moment of time, where our task is to realize that we cannot focus only on humans, we cannot focus only on this and that and this community. It has to be that everything is interconnected. That realization is new, in my view, and that I think the Parliament of the World's Religions is realizing, and we are also, our new strategic plan is like bringing all those task forces are working together. So just to give an example, I was just joking that I have been on the other side. I have been facilitating recently 3 panels, and the last one just took place a few days ago on Jane Goodall's leadership legacy. So if you know about her, like her work on chimpanzee research, but that goes far beyond. And I think we need to look at some examples like her, because we need to understand, like people really love her, but then we need to see what is it that is important about her leadership. Can we learn something from her? And like I think she really fully understood that spirituality was very important to all her work, and she realized that breaking silos was important. So I think she's an amazing example to look at. And there again, like, the first thing was animal ethics, consciousness, cognition, consciousness, sentience, and ethics. That was the first panel. Second panel was community engaged conservation for collective action. And the third one was youth activism, forever young with hope. And I was organizing and facilitating those panels, and I invite you, if you have some time, to look at them, because there are lots of messages in there. And sometimes I think we have to do the hard work of listening to things that are not convenient. And I think as long as we want to be very cozy and comfortable, and if we want to do spiritual bypass, spiritual renewal cannot happen. I really feel we have to emphasize spiritual bypass is not the same as spiritual renewal. Spirituality is not about feeling good. It's actually doing the hard work. It's the exact opposite. When you sit down and meditate, I practice Vipassana meditation, it's not about I'm going on a retreat and I'm in a spa. It's like you're meditating, you're really addressing what is the truth. So I think truth has to be a very important basis of any spiritual renewal. As long as we are shying away from truth, nothing is going to really change. And that's, I think, important thing is that renewal has to involve all beings, all of Earth, and it cannot be a separate human renewal because it's not possible. We are interconnected. There can be no renewal where there is a separation.
Amen. Yeah. One quick close on this question, just an example. I think it's a beautiful example, and one of the things I realize is we've been sharing here that has been absent in our conversation, and it's a very core value in spiritual practice, and that's the power of prayer. And right now, this weekend in Chicago, to give you an example of how the faith community is coming together, there's an initiative called Building Blocks of Peace, that you have all of these different religious communities that are coming together under the Chicagoland United in Prayer that is praying over all 77 communities of Chicago, and also praying for our nation and our leadership at the same time. That's poetry in motion. That's prayer in motion. But that's people coming together, bending knees, heads bow, across the divides, across the social and economic divides, all of these things that keep us from joining forces together. But something as simple and as beautiful and as powerful to get us to this place of this spiritual renewal for our nation and the world is the power of prayer. Let's never lose sight of that very precious spiritual practice that we all embrace and love, and calling to our higher power to bring the Spirit into our nation for such a time as this. Isn't that beautiful? The power of prayer.
So I have the very unfortunate, role here of trying to bring the conversation a little bit to a close. But first, I wanted to invite Katie to share any more remarks on this point.
You bring us back to where you want us to be, man.
Well, thank you guys so much. I mean, we also want to give maybe a little bit of time for maybe one, maybe two questions, and we'll have them both voiced out loud, and then we'll give an opportunity for the panelists to respond to them. Hopefully, you still have a little bit of time for this. Thank you.
So something that I found in the conversation that kind of eludes me is I want to bring out the fact that I like that you brought up the fact of in some of these spaces, people like to pat themselves on the back first to say, hey, we're doing this interfaith act, without sometimes thinking about the others involved. I have a friend who lives in Louisiana, rural Louisiana. His politics are different from me, but as a gay Jew with a big health scare recently, he has a friend who married my girlfriend from middle school, checked in on me to see how I was. Something that I don't see come up a lot in these spaces is the access of rural America to some of the things that we have, let's say, in suburban Wilmette, Evanston, and places where we can be in these very pluralistic kind of spaces and pat ourselves on the back, where we also have the statistic in our country that 85% of evangelical ministers don't know somebody from another faith. And that reality is very much still there, and that's in rural America. I'm wondering, I make this commitment to talk to my friend in Louisiana, even though we differ with our politics, to just talk and to be with him. Could your organizations commit to more rural action and more rural involvement? I see if the Parliament of World Religions wants to look into it, I think the Community of Christ has many rural spaces, and they come with these very allied ideas. And I know that there are rural Baha'is, but the idea is rural America doesn't have access. They may be seeing this video right now, but are they committed to? And would any of you start to commit to programs? Because we're here for action. So as an activist, I'm going to say, what commitments are you going to make to rural America? Because I think if we want to bring everyone into this this oneness, we need to start talking to rural America, and we need to start acting alongside them.
So before, we'll just take one more question. Thank you for that beautiful question.
Oh,
We'll take
sure.
one more question.
I was just going to say
I work at a grocery store, and 95% of people don't bring bags. There is plastic. Everything is covered in plastic, paper. There is so much processing that's involved to put things on the shelves. I think that if we can get back to a place where people bring their own, they package things differently, so we don't have all of this in our environment. And I was just wondering, my question is, what type of programs, what type of marketing are we doing to get people to be, more aware?
Thank you. Yeah, so we'll stop with those two questions. So we'll invite the panelists to respond. We really do hope, though, you spend time together after the panel. There will be refreshments more out there. This building is open for a few more hours, so we hope you are able to interact more with one another with these questions.
I'm going to be very quick in response to the gentleman's question here. There's an organization, a national movement that I helped to launch several decades ago. It's called the Christian Community Development Association, CCDA. And they're strongly committed to the rural community where you have local churches, not-for-profit organizations that is really rallying around the spiritual renewal of different counties and cities across North America. One of my dear mentor, Dr. John Perkins, is the actual founder of CCDA. And so this organization, this movement is extremely prevalent to address the issues that you just brought up here today. So there is a resource that you may not be aware of that's maybe in the backyard that really can assist you.
Yeah. I'll also say, I think you're putting your finger on an issue that a lot of people are thinking about, that we are as well. There's a kind of a burgeoning bridging field that truly wants to bridge, but it's coming out of urban spaces. It's quite left-leaning. And so how can you bridge if most of the people in the field are on one side, right? And there are other organizations as well that are focused on rural communities. For ourselves at Interfaith America, while our headquarters are here, we work nationally. And when you think about American higher education, you think about flagship institutions, but actually so many universities are in small communities, heavily concentrated in the Midwest and in the South. We work with so many small institutions that are actually in rural communities and are doing a lot of community-based work. I mentioned that we have large civic partnerships with the YMCA and Habitat for Humanity. The program model is we work with the national headquarters to grant the local affiliates who want to do bridging work. So that might be in Omaha or in Milwaukee or in ex-urban Atlanta. So our model is actually not staying here in Chicago or in urban centers, but is in where do people want to bridge and how can we get to them?
Did you want to say something?
Please go.
Yeah, so you were asking, so actually it's really, I also very much appreciate both those questions about rural America and environment, and actually they kind of go together in many ways too, because they are the ones who are also paying the cost of like there's so much environmental justice issue going on right now, like rural communities like which are kind of pushed away, like now the data centers issue is happening, farms are taken away. And so there's a lot that we have to worry about. And I would say that the approach, like I think from the Parliament of the World's Religions you were asking, currently we are actually just launching a global listening tour, like in the sense online, but we are going to kind of listen to the next generation. And I think that's kind of our starting point. As I said, we want to listen. And I have been like, and the series that we just are doing, Women's Leadership, Global and Grassroots Pathways for Collective Impact, is supposed to be like a starting point for that. And so I would like to connect with you later and like maybe think together about ideas, like when we are doing this listening tour, if you have any suggestion of where, like, is there a group of people who would like to join? So any youth who are interested in speaking up and like they want to share something, we'll have a form soon where they can sign up, and then we are going to all gather online and we will be listening and emphasize listening. And the environmental thing is really sad, and I'm sure like a lot of youth are the ones who are like, there's so many organizations now where like Roots and Shoots of Jane Goodall, because I was just facilitating those panels, they are all across the globe. And there are also many regenerative movements that are happening that I'm part of also. And so there is a lot going on and there is some hope, but I understand your frustration as to simple things. And so I think that's exactly right, that we need to find ways of everyone kind of at least making some commitment how my spirituality will actually look practically. So you go around, let's say, saying, I'm spiritual, and all that, but then like you're not caring about the earth, you're not caring about plastic. That doesn't kind of go together. Like, that's why we have to break all those barriers, and it's really important to do that, and without pointing fingers. So I want to emphasize that when we start walking, this is a very slippery slope. So when we start like noticing like some values, and we see people are not doing things that we really deeply care about, that's an important thing about spiritual renewal is how do you approach that? And that maybe is really something we need to think at our current time, because we are so globally connected, and so quickly we can like just send emails and like make social media posts, and the kind of misinformation is spreading so quickly that like, we have to really be very careful not to judge. Because when we come from a space of spiritual superiority, like, I am here like spiritually, and you have like nothing spiritual in you, you are like sleeping or something, and then we speak. If it is somewhere inside of us, it will show up. It has to be authentic. It's not something that you can tell, I'm going to just speak nicely. That will not work. It's an inner work that all spiritual people, in fact, have to do first. They have to show how to do this. If you call yourself spiritual, I invite you to have this practice. Am I judging people around me? We have to really all start there. And then when we stop judging people, I think they will come along. Because right now, we are judging them. Thank you.
Did you have a comment, Katie? No, you make it. So yeah, these are two excellent questions. Now, you may have remembered when I was I grew up in the Deep South, and so that's kind of my place, my culture. And there's something interesting happening right now. First of all, acknowledge that it's really true. It can be very difficult sometimes to make inroads among people who are very different down in the South. And where Baha'is are, we do what we can. You acknowledge that. We try to do that. We try to bring people of different faith groups, different races together. Race probably a little more difficult, sometimes. But even economic strata is quite a difficulty, because people talk about racism in the South. There's also classism in the South, very strong classism in the South. Like what you've heard, we call people rednecks who are in one class, and that kind of thing. You can judge whether I'm in that class or not for yourselves, but what we're seeing, though, is this, and it's a very interesting thing. I have quite a number of friends in rural areas of the South who have been, for many years, trying to engage in conversations that lead to something, with their neighbors who have been very, very conservative. But what seems to be happening now is that there's a change of feeling. Perhaps, and what I gather from the comments that they're making, is it's out of a common sense of exhaustion at the othering and the polarization that is going on. So even the people you might think of, if you're like a liberal, those conservatives, they just, are all angry and blaming everybody, or if they're conservatives, they're looking at the liberals, they just want to, all that, people are just kind of tired of it now. And to give one example of that, I talked recently with a friend in rural Alabama, and she had been trying to have interracial conversations, dialogues in her part of Alabama for many, many years, and she just was very faithful to that. Just every month she would invite people to her meeting, and she said once a year maybe, every month they happened, black people came all the time. Once a year, maybe a white person would come, they wouldn't stay, they wouldn't come back, and so it was just very, very occasional. Now, though, there are as many white people as black people coming. And what she senses is, is people are ready for something else, to have a different kind of a conversation. Now, I think I would also credit her that she also, like we're trying to do today, she doesn't begin with, well, what is your political view, or, who are you going to vote for? It's more like, well, who are we as people? What are our aspirations? What do we want to do? So, it's that kind of a more elevated, transcending kind of a conversation. Then where environmental consciousness is concerned, I couldn't agree more that that needs to be attended to, and a lot needs to be done. So we do, as Baha'is, work with many different environmental agencies, and even when we were building this building, you know, the temple itself came before LEED certification, but this is LEED certified, you know, so we're trying to do everything we can, you know, to be as conscious as we can about those kinds of issues. And our governing body that was meeting this past weekend, on which I serve, actually we're looking at food security, and we're looking at potential areas where we could begin in urban and in rural settings, dealing with, working with others on issues of food security, like Urban Growers of Chicago is one of those that we're going to be partnering with, it looks like. And the connection there, I think, is really important, because that kind of service to a community, when it's done right, also is the kind of thing that makes those bridges happen. You know, it builds those relationships between people, because it's for the common good. You know, it's something we're doing together because we all see a need for something to make the world better. And when we do that, it helps to bring people together who might otherwise not have felt as though they had a lot in common with each other, and then they find common cause, and that is a cause of a very new attitude towards each other.
So unfortunately, we don't have time for any more questions for the panel, but let me express just very briefly. Okay, let me.
Sorry, I have to say this. There's no option. So I just wanted to say we are thinking about how to do this. I think Baha'i community is a great example of how to do this, because I'm going to tell you from my example. Having these fireside conversations that are there, like that you organize, for me, it was like, I was just amazed when I found out. So I went for this event, like some interfaith festival that was happening in the city, Cincinnati, and there was a table where there was a Baha'i table, and they were having this really beautiful cards saying, inviting anyone who wants to come to a house, their house, for fireside conversation. I just could not believe, like they are kind of giving phone number, address, everything to anyone who wants to come. I was like, really? So I can come there? Like, and I can come with my daughter? And like, they were, yes, you can bring your daughter. And I was like, I have to say, I mean, since then, I have been going there every time there is a fireside conversation, because I don't find that many spaces where this happens. So I just love, I go there and we spend like, and potluck is already happening. So I think like, so there we like, you know, they invite you for dinner, but we all take food there. And then we sit and chat about spiritual things, and the kids are there in the background. This is reaching them. No one is telling them anything, but they are seeing that we are conversing about it, that there are spaces where people actually talk about these kinds of things and not about superficial things. They're actually people who care. This gives great hope also to young people. Mm-hmm. So I think we have to really look at examples that are already happening and like try to do more of that. So I really hope a lot of people will do more fireside chats, conversations.
Thank you. I really just want to close with just sharing how much I appreciate, even though this panel comes from such diverse, you know, religious and spiritual backgrounds, the harmony and the suggestions for steps to take that they had that spoke to not only all of their traditions, but I think even people who may not find themselves feeling like they belong or have a religious tradition, in the form of the importance of prayer, especially prayer together, and how that unites our heart. But the importance of meditating on that prayer, so that then you can think about the implications for how those words have for transforming your own self, but then how that can naturally lead to meaningful conversations about what we can do as a community so that we can go out and do the practical service to address the needs right in front of us. So I just love the harmony of the responses that were so organic. This is the first time this group met each other, so you really witnessed an organic, unifying conversation. Thank you all for giving extra time for joining us, and please enjoy the refreshments, enjoy one another's company, and engage in conversation with one another.
Matt, can we ask Alvin to close with a prayer?
Yes, thank you.
Let's get Alvin to do that. You close us out.
So we're going to close with a prayer. Just give us a one more moment of some reverence, please.
Also, people can listen to the choral festival on YouTube.
Perfect. So if you missed the Choral Festival, you're also able to check that out later on YouTube.
Why don't we all stand? And in a show of unity, why don't you just grab the person hand next to you, your new brother, your new sister. A show of unity and solidarity for such a time as this. Please join me and bow your heads with a word of prayer. Our God, we thank you for this amazing moment that you've brought so many beautiful people together from different cultures, different races, different backgrounds, different experience and pathways in life that have led them to a very beautiful spiritual moment in their own lives. We all was once lost, misdirected, misguided, and somewhere along the way, we found and saw the light. And we're so grateful through the many different religious experiences and backgrounds that we come from, that on this day, that we can say that we are one. Yes. We are one in spirit, we are one in truth, and we are one in love. Give us the fortitude and the wisdom and the courage to go forth out into the world and represent this oneness like never before. Break down the barriers, remove the roadblocks. Help us to shift this unwell society and world to a place of wholeness and health and reconciliation with our higher power and with one another along the way. And in the end, we would hear those amazing words that would bring joy to our spirits. Well done, well done, well done, my good and faithful servants. You did well, well done. Help us to live out this message of renewing the nation and bringing wellness and a spirit of truth and reconciliation and bringing us to this beautiful, beloved community from this day forward and forevermore. In your unique way, I would ask that you agree with this prayer by saying, amen. 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 Hug somebody next to him and tell him you love him.
Love you, man. That's great.